So, my main claim is that the death penalty has large disadvantages. First, I will be talking about the risk of executing the innocent, then the expensive cost to the death penalty, and finally, the deterrent effect fails to prevent crime. My first claim is that there is a high risk of executing the innocent. The most noticeable reason for the expansion to the number of innocent cases is, in general, the growth of cases in death penalty. Prosecutors tend to utilize weak evidence to lead to the death sentence and ignore evidence of innocence unless it's completely certain. The intense pressure to solve notorious cases can cause to point fingers and mislead to a victim. According to the Office of Defender Services of the Administrative Office of the U.S. Court, a latest study that found most defendants whose representation was the least expensive and who received the least amount of attorney expert time had an increased probability of receiving a death sentence. Defendants with less than $320,000 in terms of representation costs, which would be the bottom one-third of the federal capital trials, had a 44% chance of receiving a death sentence at trial. On the other hand, those defendants whose representation were higher than $320,000, which were the remaining two-thirds of the federal capital trials, had only a 19% chance of being sentenced to death. The study demonstrated that the defendants with low representation costs were more than twice as likely to receive a death sentence. The danger that innocent people will be executed because of errors in their criminal sentence. The danger that innocent people will be executed because of errors in the criminal justice system is getting worse. A total of 69 people have been released with the death row since 1973 after evidence of their innocence emerged. 21 condemned inmates have been released since 1993. Many of these cases were discovered not because of the normal appeals process, but rather as a result of new scientific techniques, investigations by journalists, and the dedicated work of expert attorneys not available to the typical death row inmates. This report tells the stories of people like Rolando Cruz after 10 years of Illinois death row, despite the fact that another man had confessed the crime shortly after his conviction. My second claim is that the death penalty cost is highly expensive for each individual convict. The death penalty is expensive and could cost more than imprisonment for life without parole, because the Constitution requires a long and complex judicial process for capital cases. High death penalty case expenses could be used more effectively for crime. In addition, Sheriff Bernie Guisto said he has had to lay off prison guards as a result of state budget deficits. The layoffs have reduced the number of prison beds available by more than 25%. Seattle's office force has been reduced by 24 officers and 50 civilians with the year to make up for budget cuts from the Washington legislature. Burglaries, car theft, and shoplifting have been up 18%. The force has eliminated more than 4,000 officers since the past 2 years. Based on the California Commission on the Fair Administration of Justice, the additional cost of confining an inmate to death row as compared to the maximum security prison where those sentenced to life without possibility of parole ordinarily serve their sentences is $90,000 per year per inmate. With California's current death row population of 670, that accounts for 63.3 million annually. Using conservative rough projections, the Commission estimates the annual cost of the present death penalty system to be $137 million per year. It also increases funding for highways and police, and it also increases taxes. It is not only costly, but it also takes a great amount of years to get to a death penalty case. The waste of time spent in prison waiting to be executed, for example, an inmate can be in prison for 20 years waiting for death row. The prisoner should just have been in prison if he had to wait for death row for so long. John M. Bailey, the chief state attorney, declares that every dollar we spend on a capital case is a dollar we can't spend anywhere else. We have to let the public know what it costs to pursue a capital case. So it is not clearly understood what are the clear effects of the expenses to the death penalty. My third and last claim is that the deterrent effect fails to prevent crime. The explanation to this is a theory of punishment. People understand that if they commit a crime, they will be punished. Knowing that people don't commit crimes, it deterrors them. The threat of the death penalty is supposed to deter people from committing a crime. Others say that states which do have the death penalty have higher crime rates than those that don't. That a more severe punishment only inspires more severe crimes. In an article entitled The Death Penalty, No Evidence for Deterrence, John Donohue and Justin Wolfers examined recent statistical studies that claim to show a deterrent effect from the death penalty. The authors conclude that the estimates claiming that the death penalty saves numbers of lives are simply not credible. In fact, the authors state that using the same data in proper methodology could lead to the exact opposite conclusion. That is, the death penalty actually increases the number of murders, the authors state. We show that with the most minor tweaking of the research instruments, one can estimate ranging from 429 lives saved for execution to 86 lives lost. These numbers are outside the bounds of credibility. Therefore, the death penalty fails to deter crime. In conclusion, the death penalty does not have any positive advantage to our society. Thank you.
Right. The propositions labeled clearly. The phrasing, though, has a value statement in it about the word harsh. I don't know that you need that term. Change it to substantial and you don't really have the same kinds of problems. There's a good layout of what the secondary structure is, so it's pretty easy to follow. Internal signposts are also presented and given at appropriate times. I thought you had good information on the first point. You had a couple of interesting illustrations. There were a couple of things that were not quite clear. For instance, why is there a risk of innocent people being executed because of the amount of money that was spent on trial? It talks mostly about conviction, but doesn't talk about whether or not the people are innocent. The better evidence is the information about the people who were released as a result of scientific research or because they were pursued by a variety of other people who were concerned about the death penalty, who were trying to discover new information that freed those people. The second point on costs, you develop a lot of information on costs. There's some information about like Washington that's suffering some cuts in their judicial system or in their law enforcement system. In California, the estimate is $137 million for the death penalty. I'm not sure what proportion that is of the California state budget, but I'm sure it's pretty insubstantial. And what percentage it is of California's law enforcement budget, I think that would make a bigger impact. If you could show, for instance, that there was a certain amount of programs in California that were being cut, or like the prisons being closed, or for instance this recent release of prisoners that's based on budget expenditures, and you know, if we didn't have the death penalty, that would have not been something that would have happened. I think that would be a stronger argument on that point. On the third point, you make the claim pretty clearly. You've got a couple of pieces of evidence that you cite. The one quote that you use that specifically addresses research studies, it's a little conclusionary and it sounds like it's applying to a particular study, but you don't identify what the study is, and that's going to make it a little difficult to assess. The evidence, I think you do a very good job of citing that information, so that's pretty good, and the generalizations, I think, are supported well by the evidence that you present. The presentation is problematic. You've got your hand in your pocket, you never look up, you're reading, you sometimes are mumbling what you're saying, and it's a little bit hard to hear, so it just kind of goes by rote. I'm going to rush through this, you're reading it, and you need to connect a lot more with the audience. All of your credibility is undermined by that. The one thing that you've got going is I think you have a very good set of information that you're using to support your points. But the presentation is problematic. All right, thank you.